A young aid worker gets recruited to infiltrate an enemy country undercover and recruit the youth of that country to spark a revolution. While that may sound like the plot of a new summer spy movie, it may actually be a reality, according to a new report from the Associated Press. The U.S. Agency for International Development, or better known as USAID, has been trying to destabilize the country of Cuba using young Latin Americans to infiltrate, identify, and support potentially dissident Cuban youth. USAID's website states that they are the lead U.S. government agency that works to end extreme global poverty and enable resilient democratic societies to realize their potential. But is that the case down in Cuba? To break down this summer's latest real-life spy movie, I was joined earlier by RT producer Tyrel Ventura. I first started out by asking him what USAID was doing in Cuba in the first place.
Well, it's interesting. They had hired kind of subcontracted a company called Creative Associates International to do this work, and what essentially they were doing is they took about a couple dozen 20-somethings from Venezuela, Costa Rica, and other Latin American countries, and sent them to Cuba, where they posed as tourists, visited like college campuses, and then a few of them actually created like an HIV prevention workshop. But this was all under the cover of doing that work or doing these things, but it was all under the cover to kind of recruit, catalog, and find like who in the Cuban youth would be dissident to the Castro, government, the Castro-led government down there, and really kind of be able to report back and kind of make a database almost of potential dissidents that would be on our side in enacting change in Cuba.
Were those kids, were they aware of what they were signing up for from the get-go?
Yes, I mean, they generally were. I mean, they were given specific instructions of like what to look for, how to do it.
So they were on board?
Yeah, okay. Pretty much. I mean, USAID and the Creative Associates International is also the same group that created the Zunzuneo kind of Twitter, like the Cuban version of Twitter, right, that eventually was found out to be funded by the U.S. government, and they were going to kind of like get everybody in Cuba hooked on Twitter, or a version of Twitter, and then potentially try to use that to enact another revolution down there.
Right, like in Egypt or something.
Right,
like that.
right. So these kids weren't, they knew what they were doing and they knew what they were being asked to do, but when you look at, like who these kids were and what they're being asked to do, it's kind of concerning. I mean, they were getting paid maybe $5 an hour to do this, and maybe had 30-minute seminar on like how to spot Cuban intelligence agents.
30 minutes?
Right. They're being asked to do the job of what like a CIA agent or somebody like that should be doing.
Yeah.
But these are just kids who don't really know what they're doing, and so there's a danger to that. Cuba considers what USAID does. They consider that punishable down there with jail time. Like that, it's highly dangerous for these kids to be there if they're in operations.
Was there protection for these kids? Like, did they give them guns, like weapons,
no,
anything like that?
They taught them how to operate, like do code work. They taught them how to if you say I have a headache, it means you might be being monitored by the Cubans. If you say your sister is ill on the phone or in an email, it means that you need to get out of there. But really, they weren't given any kind of escape routes. They weren't being protected in any way. They basically said, look, if you're caught, don't mention, don't mention Creative Associates International, don't mention USAID, just simply contact your home country's embassy. So again, they were kind of using these kids to get information about potential Cuban dissidents, and then if they were caught, leave them out to dry.
For like $6 an hour.
Prefer about $5 an hour.
$5
yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Great.
Especially in light that just recently USAID worker Alan Gross was caught in Cuba and imprisoned for bringing illegal technologies, what Cuba deemed illegal technologies, into the country.
Like an iPhone or something, right?
Well, I don't know.
Did any of this work actually encourage any of the dissidents, or I mean, did anything even happen?
Well, what's funny is that according to the AP and other reports, is that none of, as far as you can tell, none of their kind of political objectives actually were made. In fact, a lot of the Cuban contacts were kind of shocked that these people they were talked to thought they were just other youth from like Peru and all that. They were shocked to find out that they had an agenda as to why they were giving them information or helping them along. It's interesting, you know, these Cuban kids even were also saying, you know, they may have taken to an extreme us just, you know, kind of complaining about potholes or complaining about the general bureaucracy of the country, that we're not really dissidents as much as we're just regular citizens complaining about our government.
So it's kind of under that guise. Now, when U.S. aid were confronted with this, I'm going to read the statement here. They said, this work is not secret, it's not covert, nor is it undercover. Instead, it's important to our mission to support universal values and extreme poverty and promote resilient democratic societies. Now, what does that mean for U.S. aid going forward? I mean, isn't this kind of a black eye on their
Well, very much. I mean, you're talking about, you know, they do legitimate health work around the world. But now, I mean, $3 billion worth in the annual HIV program that they conduct, you know, but now when you look at this company, when they go into these impoverished nations, they're going to be constantly looked at, well, are you here to do what you say you're here to do, or are you here to potentially undermine our leadership? And you know,
trying to overthrow
and USA
us.
does have a history of working with the CIA. A lot of times the CIA will use their agents under cover of being like a US aid worker. And go into countries to do their job of finding analysis and things like that. But what makes this so kind of disgusting, like I said earlier, is that they were using, you know, kids who weren't trained to be covert operatives. You know, but no, there's a huge potential of danger for them in this black eye from getting kind of caught doing this. I mean, they can say, you know, well, this is just what we do, but you know, using programs to kind of circumvent other programs is a dangerous thing.
Oh boy, there's a lot more to fall out for that, I'm sure. That was RT producer Tyrel Ventura. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.